There was once a world in which many of the creatures spent many years in the attempt to rid the planet of certain vermin, which were not actually there. And do note, you are in a backward solar system if you think that worlds such as the one just described are backward. Foolishness, alternatively defined, is synonymous with the potential for progress. In one school, the children who were held back and forced to repeat were those students who took the courses seriously. As one boy eventually realized, insofar as relates to me personally, these books are not mine, the instructors are not mine, the lessons being taught are not mine, and above all, what I believe that I am learning is most definitely no part of me. 'Tis indeed a most marvelous universe in which the only way to knowledge is by becoming aware of the nonsense of knowledge. To be assured that you'll be left ashore, all that's required is that you believe you can be rescued. A woman once asked a stranger, "What's all this crap I keep hearing about being enlightened or awakening from some dreadful unrecognized state of sleep and all that kind of stuff? What's with it?" And the stranger replied, "Well, normally a question such as yours is unworthy a sincere response, but inasmuch as I am close to dying, either that or I've reached the limit of my Visa card, I'll answer you. What such ideas refer to is simply the difference in a person knowing what is possible in life, specifically pointing to the mind, and what is not." And upon hearing this as the explanation of her inquiry, to say that the woman was beset by a severe disappointment would be a severe understatement. According to one mail-order catalog, after you die, if you've been well-dressed most of your life, you're not required to waste any more of your mental time on useless matters any more than you did before you died. Postage, however, is not included. It's quite easy to look where the nap of the carpet has been pushed aside and the backing revealed and mistaking it for a piece of foreign matter. Nap, neuron, what's the difference? They both start with N. There was once two brothers who were in business together, and they called their operation, "You got to have a plan, you mustn't have a plan." And the tricky part of doing business with them was that you could never be sure if they were open or not. "Just the way we planned it," noted the brothers. A woman not far from there says that if you listen passively to the broadcasts, you'll believe whatever they tell you. She then wonders who tells them what to say. And before that, who told the ones who told them, and on back like that. Perhaps her and the brothers might get together and develop a recipe that takes into account the reality that, if the script is already written, perhaps her and the brothers might get together and develop a recipe that takes into account the reality that, if the script is already written, concerns regarding what'll we do next are moot. If it wasn't for the idea that men could somehow be other than they are, children's toys wouldn't be so commonly coming apart. One man's complaint: why are we issued something of such a delicate nature that its permanent safety seems impossible? I guess if some people had their way, glue factories and other renowned human institutions would be put out of business. A boy asked a stranger just how long you can live in one particular place and continue to misfeel its actual year-round temperature. There was once a world in which school children were issued books, not that they could hold and read, but books that would grip them and pass to them the direct sensation of what was meant. All who say that they don't get it and who think that they might eventually never will. Question: What was the origin of the notion of overstaying your welcome? Answer: men thinking about themselves. Okay, if that one was too difficult, here's an easier one. Liar. Question: how can you always definitely spot an ordinary man? Answer: the continual pursuit of the impossible troubles him not. And don't tell me that that one wasn't easy, or else you're going to knock over your plate of beans. Regardless of its prohibition, if you live in a reality of theater, someone will always be yelling, fire. More about human, specifically mental, expenses. The cost of anything is in direct proportion to your lack of understanding it. On one of our invisible sister planets were once some creatures whose classification was listed not as Homo sapien, but as sign us up. Don't worry about the draft in this universe's league. The idea of there being a first round of choices and a final one is but a localized illusion, and one which becomes obvious to everyone when it's too late. But how can it ever be too late, you ask, if there is no final round? It's too late in the context of a man trailing behind the thoughts running through him until he can no longer conceive of any alternative thereto. It is then too late in that his mental life has cost him everything he potentially possessed. The cost of anything is in direct proportion to your lack of understanding it. Headline: more regarding sleep and professional perspectives thereof. To try and get somewhere, one man at first tried to sleep less at night, then switched his approach and tried to sleep even more than before, and then built an alarm clock that would ring at indeterminable times, then finally consulted an expert in such matters who, as soon as the man mentioned the word tried, laughed himself into an uncontrollable fit. In one city, the train station sells tickets only to those with nowhere to go. You know who you are, which is not true, for it is precisely those who do not know who they are who want to buy such tickets and believe that if they can but go someplace else, there will they finally discover exactly who they are. Such travel is not broadening. Indeed, for a mind with potential, the name of that rail line should be Anaconda. After many years of wanting to bake the universe's most astounding cake, one man discovered that you can either pursue a course of cream puffs or one of iron bars. But no matter which way you go, you've eventually got to get out of the kitchen once, twice, and 3 times for good. A boy asked his father how to tell a standard story from one with a supernatural potential, and the elder replied, the latter never have a fucking moral, just chocolate frosting. One man enjoyed his first real head-on collision so much that he came back for more. To believe that there is secret information is to check your mail on the basis of there being an undiscovered zip code within your home one. One man awakened from the dead conditions of local reality to find himself not in hell, but inside a soundproof booth on a quiz show. In there, locked up for eternity, alone. Alone, that is, other than for that other self of his. One man stood in his backyard and announced to life, you can't pay me enough to remain here. But come to think of it, neither can you for me to leave. So there. And just then flew past his head a hummingbird of such swiftness that it was its own twin reflection. Not actual twin, mind you, but twin reflection. Children count to 1, adults count to 2. A man who's been around counts 3 north blue. The measurements a man uses to measure reality measures not reality, but rather the mind of the man. One man believed that he could understand the secret of existence if he could but just comprehend the purpose of toys. A man went seeking entry into a monastery devoted to achieving enlightenment, and was told he had his choice of two ways by which to commence his participation therein. He could either retire alone to a cave to meditate and wait it out, or go to his room and stay there, just thinking until, as they called it, things worked themselves out. What he didn't know at the time was that not 5 miles from there was a competing school who described it as until things come to a head. And the particularly attractive aspect of it was that they didn't charge a cent more. There was once a man who went on an indeterminate train trip, and for quite a while had high appreciation and warm feelings for the tracks, without which he apparently, nay obviously, could have never commenced his journey. But a day eventually came when he began to rue the tracks, which for so long had seemed to serve him well, and rather than being of assistance, he began to see them as a hindrance. Realizing the true nature of anything always results in it costing less. In the beginning, one man was gregarious. Then he became not so gregarious. And after that found himself losing track of exactly what gregarious meant. But just in time, thank God, he was run down by an overly friendly herd of reindeer and brought back to reality. In one galaxy was a planet on which the most popular pastime was the inhabitants all holding hands and jumping off a cliff together. A cliff named, "Here's proof we know what we're doing." There was once a moth in a closet who looked around and pronounced, "Who's going to say otherwise?" If you swallow a virus, it can go either up or down in your system. If it goes down, treatments are possible. If it goes up, forget it. Unless, of course, you're ordinary, then you can try and treat it till the sun catches fire. A man once asked a stranger, "If you can't immediately stop all talk, might it be just as good to at least shorten your yes, he re?" There's a certain place in our universe where there's an off-on switch, but no one who lives there knows where it is. There's a few people in our universe who have a private understanding of what living here means. Only men of undeveloped ability need drugs to make them dumber. Life told one man, "I don't deliver." And the man thought, but if only I could stop accepting. Which in fact is possible for those who discover the off-on switch. One man thought, "If I was but fast enough, nothing could ever catch me." And a dead grandfather from Amsterdam contacted him to note that if you would just go ahead and catch everything to begin with, there'd be no need to go faster. Although atoms can obviously communicate with planets, many people still cannot conceive of the reverse, which is one reason for the demise of the two-pants suit south of the equator. Those who believe that someone or something is watching over them should rent an educational video detailing the attitude that most statues have toward pigeons and other flying myths. One man began to think that he was now on the right train when the conductor started committing suicide at every stop. A certain legend says that man long ago was split into two parts, and that the purpose of human existence is for each person to now locate their other half. Which ain't a bad little story, but a more useful taking of the tale would be to realize that the familiar ring to the legend resounds within each person individually, and that there is no missing piece to be found either externally and certainly not internally. The song, "There Ain't Nobody Here But Us Chickens," is close. About as close as any other sacred scripture. The universal curse is a certain other. The universal curse in a certain other universe is division to those who division thinks. There used to be a land here on earth where some people lived who believed that they would grow taller if they learned to kick themselves in both ankles simultaneously. I'm not positive, but I think this was the same bunch who claimed that the gods love a moron. And so was one chap moved to muse, no man is so dumb as when he stoops over to help a child, and the child is him. There was once a race of men who could talk directly to the dead, but they abandoned the practice once they realized they were only talking to themselves. Oh yeah, everybody else but them went on believing that they were still doing it. There is a particular spot in our universe where you can yell into, and sounds will come back that sound like whatever you want them to sound like. Tonight's little story about life. Life once decided to torture one group of creatures by making them believe there can be more to life than there actually is. Wait a minute. We can do better than that. Okay, here it is. Life once decided to favorably single out one group of creatures by making them believe that there can be more to life than there actually is. A man asked a stranger, "What's the difference in feeling unique and having someone stuff a hippo in your backpack?" And the stranger had a really good laugh once again from the sparkling array of local conditions, as perceived by the locals, that is. There was once a woman who for many years believed it was possible to tell lies and misrepresent the truth. Then she undertook what proved to be a rewarding examination of this question. In what place within a finite space does some space hide from other space? There was once a planet on which it was prima facie cause for involuntary psychiatric confinement to say that you wanted to know yourself better. One man's most recent private tattoo reads, "Do as conditions demand, but do not think about the conditions." It's in a really nice blue and gold script. A mother thought molecule told some baby molecules, "If you're going to spill coffee all over everything, at least be sure it's loaded with sugar." 'Tis only the dumb-sighted who undervalue the everyday need for the sweetness of stickiness. There was once a house whose internal space dictated the outside weather. This house is the perceived domain of the routine mind. And do note that its IQ cannot be increased by taking it outside and bringing the weather indoors. Coming or going, a swinging door will still hit you in the ass. One guy's question of the hour is it my mind that produces me, or me that gives the impression of a mind? Ain't it funky, he adds. Another tip for those on the trip. If you're still talking about travel, it is possible to miss hearing them announce the end of the line. There was once a planet whose creatures were made up of leftover parts from other planets. It can still be seen if you will look in the mirror just above your neck. Now that for sure is funky. Rather than my normally attempted serious commentary on today's news, I thought we'd try to approach a more lighthearted approach to deal with it on a fictional basis. Now, I must admit, I am not trained in the world of fiction. I have no particular background, but I am an ordinary person with an ordinary mind, and therefore am to the manner born. In other words, fiction is certainly no stranger to any of us. There is a veil. Remember, this is all fiction. There is a veil that covers one level of what people think of as reality. It's like some sort of throw rug or some sort of cover that's thrown over furniture. But it's thrown over everything that the mind conceives of as being part of reality. It does not render whatever reality is to be anything less than reality. But what you're seeing is not a couch. What you're seeing is not a chair. What you're seeing is, and it still may be, a valid representation. There is no need for any further chicanery or trickery, but you are not seeing the couch or the chair. You are seeing it as covered by this veil, by this opaque slipcover, throw rug, whatever you call it in the wonderful world of interior decoration. It is thrown over it. It was thrown over, now not what I call reality. I'm not here. Remember, this is fiction to begin with. And so it is not me saying that people have an incorrect view of reality. I guess I could say it since it's fictional, but I'm not even going to say that within a fictional context. That's not even the point. There is whatever life is, regardless of what you say, regardless of what I say, and let's call that, we can do this in fiction, real reality. But then there is another reality, and it's not really unreal, but it's simply another reality, and that is what I'm telling you, the reality perceived by the human mind, which is reality covered with a throw rug, with a veil, just laid over each and every part of reality. So what you're seeing cannot be said to be fallacious. It cannot be said to be not reality. It is simply reality with a covering. The whole idea behind activities such as this, when people hear of it, if they make any sense of it, they believe, if I was using this kind of intro to it, then they would say, aha, the whole idea of trying to understand oneself, to know oneself, to discover if there is a secret to life or if there is a purpose to life. That the whole point of discovering it would be, to use the fictionalized allegory I just conjured up, then they would think that the purpose of it would be to remove this covering from reality, to remove the veil and to see directly the couch or the chair. It's pretty difficult with any sincerity to say anything against that, especially since I made it up. I like it. Sounds good. I even made up the part about them conceiving of what a more enlightened view or a greater understanding of life would be, to remove the veil of the furniture, which I made up to begin with. I like it. They would like it. You will like it. You will like it, or you will suffer the consequences. No, you won't. You're already suffering the consequences. The reality behind my descriptions of two forms of reality, the certainty of that is manifest throughout the human vocabulary, the mental vocabulary. It is manifest subterraneanly in all religion, with all notions of someone reaching a new level of spirituality, of entering, for the Christians, becoming part of the kingdom of God. The idea of Muslims becoming one with Allah, the idea of Hindus of returning to a union with the core of reality, and all such as that. If it was taken at a spiritual level, people are, even though they're still conceiving of it as being external to each individual, that is, that in some way the gods must cooperate, or in some way you must perform rituals, build up merit through behavior, so that there is some cooperation from without you, some help from without you, that indeed would unveil some greater understanding of life. The more fundamentalist, that is, the more simplistic, be the thinking of the religious people in general, the more they conceive of my uncovered reality. Instead of seeing a couch or a chair without the covering, of course, they believe they would see the face of God. But the idea that there is some way to remove a sort of curtain or a veil, something between man and another level of understanding, is certainly not unknown. When it falls into the hands historically of people who claim to be mystics, they make it sound more and more beyond the pale of ordinary comprehension. They make it sound more and more as to be a spooky, selective, occult, hidden, perhaps frightening endeavor, which, if you were going to have a moron contest on this planet, I don't want to get into it. To believe that a removal of a veil between you and some other comprehension of simply what's going on, to believe that that in some way is weird, dangerous, unusual even, almost defies belief. That was a bit of theatrical hyperbole, because nothing defies belief. But if you ever get a glimpse of it, you might momentarily, if you're overheated and your tire pressure is low, you might momentarily think, that damn near defies belief. But you'll be over it quickly. Pull into a 7-Eleven and get a big gulp. Get some fresh air, and you'll be over it momentarily. The ordinary, including the religious and people who publicly claim to be involved with New Age, mystical, metaphysical activity, they would all, in their various ways, to take my opening allegory of a covering over reality as perceived by the human mind, that is all we're perceiving to be reality, is a reality with a covering, with a throw cloth over it. The ordinary would then say, the ordinary religious and the ordinary publicly proclaimed, self-proclaimed mystics, they would then profess that should this covering be removed, that is, a person becomes enlightened, that what they will see will be shocking, will be astounding. Their literature is full of everything from assumed myths to claimed history of men and women undergoing such an experience and being rendered helpless, unconscious, staggered, and it being forever proclaimed to be absolutely indescribable, extraordinary revelations. In technical terms, I bet you can fill it in. That's known as, they keep asking me to cut down the profanity in the, that is great cosmic dragon doo-doo. Well, consider, how is it, even though they don't look at it this way, but how is it that you're looking, at best, at some reality between you and same has some distorting, as they think, but some covering. If you're looking at a couch under a drop cloth, what kind of idiot cannot make out that it's a couch? Or put another way, if I'm giving it the right proper description, that even though it is covered, and there is no doubt, there is absolutely no doubt, even though this is fiction, there is no fictional doubt that the mind is a kind of drop cloth over whatever it looks at. So, how would you expect, if your mind looks out, your mind, everyone's mind, there is no exception to this, whoever's mind looks out and you see what appears to be a couch under a covering, how can you believe that after this extraordinary experience of awakening, enlightenment, the great conscious liberation, that the covering is removed and it's anything other than a couch? That if I am telling you correctly, that you look out at life and you see a thing over here that looks like a couch, and you even accept the continuing or the rest of my allegory that I am saying, and as I point out, it's not just me saying, this is a commonly accepted part of collective human intelligence one way or the other, that there is something standing between man, that there is some sort of gap between man and some direct realization of reality. And you don't even have to be mystically inclined by your own self-proclamation. You don't have to be religiously inclined. Philosophers, people who would claim to be atheists, people who would claim to be hard-nosed would-be scientists, are still faced with the fact that no matter what their IQ, no matter how adroit and agile they are with words and neural activity, if they are good at all, it does not take any philosopher long to come to an absolute neural cul-de-sac. And they see it. You can't come right out and admit it unless you've got another occupation in reserve. But they realize that I keep running against the wall and they don't enjoy it. Like a good, real something or other does, the kind of person who knows how to drive and die. That's the ones who can get something out of a continuing head-on collision with a wall, drive it in over and over and over. Only they can enjoy it, a certain few. But philosophers, ordinary people, do not enjoy it. They find it to be extremely annoying, same way as most of them look at trying to understand what's going on. But everyone realizes what I'm trying to say. What I'm pointing out is that no matter whether they ever had occasion to use such terms, if it's pointed out to them, any ordinary person, if they would stop for a second and give you the best attention they have, would admit that there is something going on between, that there is some object, some phenomenon, that there is something standing between them and a direct understanding or even perception of life. They certainly, I repeat, we know that people do not normally go around thinking in such ways, but their reactions to life, their conversations, the verbal basis of all religions, philosophies, social models, political paradigms is all based upon the fact, put crudely, that we don't understand exactly what the hell is going on here. That's a fact. No one, they do not like to put it that way. They do not. But if that were not so, there would be no need for social models, political paradigms. There would be no need for civilization. There would be no need for any attempted collective view of life. Because if everyone understood what was going on, all problems would be solved. You just have to, I guess, take my word for that for the time being if you don't see it. But if everyone knew what was going on, if every person knew what was going on in life, you would need no models of reality, you'd need no religion, you'd need no laws, you'd need no courts, you'd need no jails, you would need no locks on your doors. As long as your neighbor had something to eat and something to sleep with, you'd be safe. If not, he'd kill you. But it'd be quite simple. It wouldn't be anything personal. Wouldn't be anything to worry about. You don't see lions worried. We've been through this. There's no such thing. There's no record of a leopard with a neuroses or an elephant that felt paranoid, that felt like people were following him, that someone had it in for him. Ordinary people, you just have to either grasp it or not. In their own ways, if it was pointed out, everyone would agree that there is something standing between them, that there is something, if I put it that way, that there is something between them, something interfering with their direct understanding of what life is about. I assume you get it, but parenthetically, I'll try to point out one more time. The reality of that is manifest in men conceiving, conjuring up sacred literature, holy writ, 10 commandments, laws, non-clerical laws, morality, that all of this is conjured up as something external to man, to his mind, that apparently presents a better reflection of reality. I mean, the proof of it They can't see it, but the proof of men believing that here's a book somewhere written down and someone tells them God wrote it. Well, he didn't actually write it. He dictated it to a guy once. And so he wrote it down, and here is what God wants us to do. Now, from any basis upon which the mind works, it doesn't matter who you are, and it's not an attack, but on any basis of being able to get up and tie your own shoes and go to the bathroom without killing yourself, with that basic intellectual, that basic ability to be intellectual, on that basis, no one, if they glance at it, no one has any cause to take that as being anything other than fiction. That is, for someone to say, oh, here's what God told us to do. God said that? Oh, yeah. Did God write that? Well, not this thing exactly. We printed it, of course, on a printing press. But you have the original where God wrote it. Well, no, we don't have that because he didn't actually write it. He told a guy one time to write it. Well, is the guy here? Can I talk to him? I like to know, well, no, the guy's dead. But anyway, how do we know that God didn't? He said, oh, the guy before he died, he told somebody, he said, here, this thing I wrote down, I'm going to leave here with you. I didn't actually write this. God told me to write this down. So that's how we know it's true. I'm theatrically playing someone, an ordinary person, neither Christian, Jew, atheist, agnostic, moose. I am theatrically trying to display an ordinary man actually exercising the minimal amount of intelligence available to him to listen to that. And if I may be so bold, to at least have some problem with it. It serves a purpose, but the purpose has nothing to do with a man's understanding of reality. It is contrary in the opposite direction. It is to compensate for men not normally having a direct perception of reality, and so they attempt to take externally derived, externally extant descriptions of reality, and particularly, if I may say so, if it has a proclaimed extra systemic source, divine. In other words, not another human said this, because if another human said it, hell, it could be my brother-in-law. He could come up to me and say, well, here's what God wants us to do, or here's the way men should behave. I think, well, shit, Leroy, I know you, you're a damn drunk. Why should I listen to you? But here it is, God said it, and you don't know that a guy named Leroy from Lebanon 4,000 years ago wrote it. Perhaps a bit more verbally lucid than your brother-in-law Leroy here. But another human wrote it. But it now appears, you don't know where it came. It apparently gives. People's mind will accept the fact. It's a compensation that their mind will not perceive. They don't even care to pursue a attempted direct perception under the covers to see the couch. When somebody will show up and go, well, the couches are hidden. Things are covered. Men are partially deluded. And of course, religion's idea, they don't use it in the sense I am specifically, but it's still there, that men have been deluded, that their minds have been clouded, their perception, their understanding of what is true and false has now been distorted by some ill step they took a long time ago. But in spite of that, God came along later and says, all right, here's the way things should have gone. Had you not been partially blinded, had you not been stigmatized by me, with due good reason, here is what you could have seen. And if you do not see it now, here's the way you should behave so that at some future time I will let you see how things are. That is all men require in the main. And if it's not, they reject it. But notice, at any given time, you can poll the planet, and way up in the high 90% of people say, yes, they believe in whatever their local religion is, they believe in a deity, they believe in divine, revealed scripture of some kind. They believe that an extra systemic force, they believe that the creator of the universe, that there is such a thing, and that he or she or it has come along at various times and spoken to certain men and told them what was under the covers, told them what reality really was about. The proof that men do not care to see is that they will accept that, which, as I said, is it's no good to attack religion. It's no good to attack anything that's a product of the human mind, because if I was simply here to attack it, or you can attack it, and I can turn right around, as you know I can do, or you can do by now. You can attack something that's a product of the human mind, such as religion, or if you don't like that, accounting. You can attack it, and I can turn right around, or you can, if you know what you're doing, you can turn right around and attack the attack. You can make the attack look ridiculous. So attacking it is not the point. But if you see that it is an absolute compensation, or to be more direct, it is an excuse for not attempting to see on your own, once you realize that, then you also see that all manifestations of the mind and all attacks on the manifestations of their mind are equally meaningless. That does no good to be an idiot if you're going to accuse other idiots. Just because you're a moron, it doesn't help to point out that everybody else is a moron. You have not aided your cause whatsoever. You're no worse off. Now, of course, unless you're trying to get out of Moronville. There is nothing to do with the mind's slipcovers. There is nothing to do with the mind's drop cloths over furniture other than to realize what it is. It does no good to attack it. It does no good to dream about it. It does no good to think that someone can teach you how to remove them. It does no good to believe that you can move somewhere where they don't have throw cloths over the furniture. It does no good to believe, I can go on and on, that through some divine intervention, perhaps under miraculous circumstances, the throw cloths might be supernaturally removed. Perhaps floated, perhaps raised like a cheap magic show in Atlantic City Casino, and you get a glimpse of what's there. The thing about the mind is this. If you can look at life in a certain way that I've attempted to describe, this universe can be seen in a certain way. It could be, what do they call the universe now? The universe? I could tell you another name. It could be named Nothing Changes. That'd be a good name for this universe. It would be a good name for a life were it not for the human mind. Because if you can stop the motions of your mind for some length of time, and we're speaking in a matter of less than days and weeks and months, and you can do it over a number of times, is the way it normally works, you can get a direct perception of your own that is opposed to the way it seems now. That life itself is pretty much nothing going on. It's just pretty much nothing's going on. And all you do is fall back into ordinary thought, and that's ridiculous. And if you're an ordinary thought, when you hear me say that, it's ridiculous. I know it. I would reject it out of hand. The mind goes, what else? You got anything else to say? That's it? What else? What else? What else? Come on. That's it. That's the revelation. What else? Revelation. If you can see that by and large nothing's going on, that is to say the furniture does not really move. Reality. It's almost motionless compared on the scale of one man's existence of 80 years. Life is truly, relatively speaking, damn near motionless. That being the case, me saying that the furniture is, for all intents and purposes, motionless, then you've got to understand that this drop cloth is not motionless. Drop cloth is ill-named. It is not an object unless you can Maybe some of you can do it. It's possible to conceive of an object that is always in motion. Because what is covered in is thought. And if you think that thought is stable, then you've never taken a glimpse. If you think that thought is in any way reliable, that is stationary, that you can lay a thought down, like over a piece of furniture, and the son of a bitch stay there. Lay it down anywhere. Can you lay down a thought and say, down boy, down, sit, and walk around the room? That is, turn your head for a split second and look back, and it's there. You don't know where it went. It sure as hell didn't sit. The coverings over the furniture of reality are not objects, or put it another way, same thing. If my description of reality, of the furniture, of life itself, of this universe from top to bottom, is, for all intents and purposes, for one man's lifetime on that scale, that it's motionless. It's just almost nothing is happening. If that is true, if it is a motionless, stable condition, motionless condition, not just stable, the covering on it is not motionless. If it were motionless, the situation would be entirely different. It's not much further to take this verbally from making any sense. If the covering was absolutely motionless, it would not be opaque. If the damn thing would stop, if you can stop thought, it is no longer opaque. It no longer clouds what you see in life. If you can stop it, assuming it's still there, it becomes transparent. That is what is called these kinds of religious revelations, the awakenings, the enlightenments, is that thought stops. That the coverings on it, it's always doing like this, and it renders it opaque. It renders what it amounts to, as I said, a veil. It is like a veil between you and everything you see. Between your mind, if you want to be specific, and everything that the mind sees. Because there are two ways to look. You can look with your eyes, which a lion can do, or you can look with your mind, which is what men do. What men see with their eyes compared to what they see with their mind nowadays, well, it's always been so, but nowadays it seems more apparent. It's not that anything's gone amiss. It's gotten a better from the collective view. But what men see with their eyes is minuscule. What men see with their eyes is only enough to keep them alive for 80 years. That's all they see. That's from whence cometh the sensation that people will guffaw, those who know how to guffaw. Those who don't will just snort. In recognition, when I make up one of these little things about walking along or doing an important job, cutting wood, working with saws and all kinds of things, and you don't really look. All you can do is glance or drive your car down the freeway, bumper to bumper, side by side, at 90 miles an hour. And very few wrecks. It is not based upon the mind's ability. It is just the eyes. It is the physical sight, and it's just momentary. Compared to the degree to which men use their minds to look, it's not even close. It'll be 8 or 9, 10 to 1 for every time that the eyes look compared to the mind. That is what is normally referred to, I think, on this planet as thinking. But it is the mind looking. It is men seeing with the mind, not the eyes. You're obviously continually seeing with the eyes, but notice you're very seldom, is what I was pointing out. The ratio is not magic. I'm just saying 1 to 10. That's a safe neighborhood. Is all you got to do insofar as apparently, willfully, consciously, deliberately looking with the eyes. You know what it is by now. Such as driving your car is a great example. You can drive your car, you can talk to somebody, you can play with the radio, you can use a cell phone, you can just daydream, and all it takes is just periodically, just every few seconds, just glance. Which I'm trying to represent, that is about as close it would come to a willful looking with the eyes as you glance up the road. But then you turn around and talk to somebody, and out of peripheral vision, you got some idea of the road. You could still run into something, but you can be talking to somebody doing 90 miles an hour and just periodically, you just take a glance. You do not do that with the mind. The mind is continually looking. The mind is where men believe. That is where man put their faith, by and large, is in their mental looking. It's called thinking. I was being, of course, dramatically sarcastic to say, I think you call that thinking. You can't call that thinking. You can't call it you thinking. It's thinking doing you. It is you being a conduit for some sort of activity in the brain. And it translates itself into seeing, that you believe, well, I'm seeing another person. You're physically seeing them. But the person you're talking to, you're not just physically seeing the person. You're engaged in some conversation, debating some idea. You're not seeing the person physically, although your eyes are. You're seeing them somewhere else. Or when you just hear ideas, if you're not talking to someone else. You're driving along and you heard me talking like this on a radio show. And you're driving along, your eyes are obviously seeing the road enough to keep you in the road, but then your mind begins to see what I'm talking about. I don't mean to see and agree with it, but your mind begins looking at what I'm talking about. It's selecting where I'm obviously a fool, where I'm wrong, where I might be on something in one particular area. Your mind is seeing it. It's all bullshit. It's all meaningless. It's not right or wrong. You're not seeing anything. The mind does not see anything. All it sees is the outline. All it sees is reality with a covering, with a drop cloth, with a veil. As I said, I did not come here to attack religion, but I've got to point out, any of you who are tired, who have just about had your fill of your local mosque, synagogue, or church, as you leave, I will hand out cards of a certain unusual, well, what they are is a moving company. You might call them. That had to do with furniture, see? You see? I don't know whether I see or not. If anyone who didn't have enough, such